Agatha Christie, The Man from the Sea. Mr. Satterthwaite was feeling old. That might not have been surprising, since in the estimation of many people he was old. Careless youths said to their partners, "Old Satterthwaite? Oh, he must be 100, or at any rate about 80. And even the kindest of girls said indulgently, "Oh, Satterthwaite. Yes, he's quite old, he must be 60, which was almost worse, since he was 69. In his own view, however, he was not old. 69 was an interesting age, an age of infinite possibilities, an age when at last the experience of a lifetime was beginning to tell. But to feel old, that was different, a tired, discouraged state of mind when one was inclined to ask oneself depressing questions. What was he after all? A little dried-up elderly man, with neither chick nor child, with no human belongings, only a valuable art collection which seemed at the moment strangely unsatisfying. No one to care whether he lived or died. At this point in his meditations, Mr. Satterthwaite pulled himself up short. What he was thinking was morbid and unprofitable. He knew well enough, who better, that the chances were that a wife would have hated him, or alternatively that he would have hated her, that children would have been a constant source of worry and anxiety, and that demands upon his time and affection would have worried him considerably. To be safe and comfortable, said Mr. Satterthwaite firmly, that was the thing. The last thought reminded him of a letter he had received that morning. He drew it from his pocket and reread it, savouring its contents pleasurably. To begin with, it was from a duchess, and Mr. Satterthwaite liked hearing from duchesses. It is true that the letter began by demanding a large subscription for charity, and but for that would probably never have been written, but the terms in which it was couched were so agreeable that Mr. Satterthwaite was able to gloss over the first fact. "So you've deserted the Riviera," wrote the Duchess. "What is this island of yours like? Cheap? Canotti put up his prices shamefully this year, and one shan't go to the Riviera again. I might try your island next year if you report favourably, though I should bait 5 days on a boat. Still, anywhere you recommend is sure to be pretty comfortable. Too much so. You'll get to be one of those people who do nothing but coddle themselves and think of their comfort. There's only one thing that will save you. Satterthwaite. And that is your inordinate interest in other people's affairs." As Mr. Satterthwaite folded the letter, a vision came up vividly before him of the Duchess. Her meanness, her unexpected and alarming kindness, her caustic tongue, her indomitable spirit. Spirit. Everyone needed spirit. He drew out another letter with a German stamp upon it, written by a young singer in whom he had interested himself. It was a grateful, affectionate letter. "How can one thank you, dear Mr. Satterthwaite? It seems too wonderful to think that in a few days I shall be singing Isolde." A pity that she had to make her debut as Isolde. A charming, hard-working child, Olga, with a beautiful voice but no temperament. He hummed to himself, "Nay, order him. Pray understand it. I command it. I, Isolde." No, the child hadn't got it in her, the spirit, the indomitable will, all expressed in that final Ich Isolde. Well, at any rate, he had done something for somebody. This island depressed him. Why, oh, why had he deserted the Riviera, which he knew so well and where he was so well known? Nobody here took any interest in him. Nobody seemed to realize that here was the Mr. Satterthwaite, the friend of duchesses and countesses and singers and writers. No one in the island was of any social importance, or of any artistic importance either. Most people had been there 7, 14, or 21 years running, and valued themselves, and were valued accordingly. With a deep sigh, Mr. Satterthwaite proceeded down from the hotel to the small straggling harbour below. His way lay between an avenue of bougainvillea, a vivid mass of flaunting scarlet that made him feel older and greyer than ever. "I'm getting old," he murmured. "I'm getting old and tired." He was glad when he had passed the bougainvillea and was walking down the white street with the blue sea at the end of it. A disreputable dog was standing in the middle of the road, yawning and stretching himself in the sun. Having prolonged his stretch to the utmost limits of ecstasy, he sat down and treated himself to a really good scratch. He then rose, shook himself, and looked round for any other good thing that life might have to offer. There was a dump of rubbish by the side of the road, and to this he went sniffing in pleasurable anticipation. True enough, his nose had not deceived him. A smell of such rich putrescence that surpassed even his anticipations. He sniffed with growing appreciation, then suddenly abandoning himself, he lay on his back and rolled frenziedly on the delicious dump. Clearly, the world this morning was a dog paradise. Tiring at last, he regained his feet and strolled out once more into the middle of the road. And then, without the least warning, a ramshackle car careered wildly round the corner, caught him full square, and passed on unheeding. The dog rose to his feet, stood a minute regarding Mr. Satterthwaite, a vague, dumb reproach in his eyes, then fell over. Mr. Satterthwaite went up to him and bent down. The dog was dead. He went on his way, wondering at the sadness and cruelty of life. What a queer, dumb look of reproach had been in the dog's eyes. "Oh, world," they seemed to say. "Oh, wonderful world in which I have trusted. Why have you done this to me?" Mr. Satterthwaite went on, past the palm trees and the straggling white houses, past the black lava beach where the surf thundered, and where once, long ago, a well-known English swimmer had been carried out to sea and drowned, past the rock pools where children and elderly ladies bobbed up and down and called it bathing, along the steep road that winds upwards to the top of the cliff. For there, on the edge of the cliff, was a house, appropriately named La Paz. A white house with faded green shutters tightly closed, a tangled, beautiful garden, and a walk between cypress trees that led to a plateau on the edge of the cliff where you looked down, 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 to the deep blue sea below. It was to this spot that Mr. Satterthwaite was bound. He had developed a great love for the garden of La Paz. He had never entered the villa. It seemed always to be empty. Manuel, the Spanish gardener, wished one good morning with a flourish and gallantly presented ladies with a bouquet and gentlemen with a single flower as a buttonhole, his dark face wreathed in smiles. Sometimes Mr. Satterthwaite made up stories in his own mind about the owner of the villa. His favourite was a Spanish dancer, once world-famed for her beauty, who hid herself here so that the world should never know that she was no longer beautiful. He pictured her coming out of the house at dusk and walking through the garden. Sometimes he was tempted to ask Manuel for the truth, but he resisted the temptation. He preferred his fancies. After exchanging a few words with Manuel and graciously accepting an orange rosebud, Mr. Satterthwaite passed on down the cypress walk to the sea. It was rather wonderful sitting there, on the edge of nothing, with that sheer drop below one. It made him think of Tristan and Isolde, of the beginning of the third act with Tristan and Covenal, that lonely waiting, and of Isolde rushing up from the sea and Tristan dying in her arms. No, little Olga would never make an Isolde of Cornwall, that royal hater and royal lover. He shivered. He felt old, chilly, alone. What had he had out of life? Nothing. Nothing. Not as much as that dog in the street. It was an unexpected sound that roused him from his reverie. Footsteps coming. It was an unexpected sound that roused him from his reverie. Footsteps coming along the cypress walk were inaudible. The first he knew of somebody's presence was the English monosyllable, "damn." He looked round to find a young man staring at him in obvious surprise and disappointment. Mr. Satterthwaite recognized him at once as an arrival of the day before who had more or less intrigued him. Mr. Satterthwaite called him a young man, because in comparison to most of the die-hards in the hotel, he was a young man, but he would certainly never see 40 again and was probably drawing appreciably near to his half-century. Yet in spite of that, the term young man fitted him. Mr. Satterthwaite was usually right about such things. There was an impression of immaturity about him. As there is a touch of puppyhood about many a full-grown dog, so it was with the stranger. Mr. Satterthwaite thought, "This chap has really never grown up. Not properly, that is." And yet there was nothing Peter Panish about him. He was sleek, almost plump. He had the air of one who has always done himself exceedingly well in the material sense and denied himself no pleasure or satisfaction. He had brown eyes, rather round, fair hair turning grey, a little moustache and rather florid face. The thing that puzzled Mr. Satterthwaite was what had brought him to the island. He could imagine him shooting things, hunting things, playing polo or golf or tennis, making love to pretty women. But in the island there was nothing to hunt or shoot, no games except golf croquet, and the nearest approach to a pretty woman was represented by elderly Miss Baba Kindersley. There were, of course, artists to whom the beauty of the scenery made appeal, but Mr. Satterthwaite was quite certain that the young man was not an artist. He was clearly marked with the stamp of the Philistine. While he was resolving these things in his mind, the other spoke, realizing somewhat belatedly that his single ejaculation so far might be open to criticism. "I beg your pardon," he said with some embarrassment. "As a matter of fact, I was, well, startled. I didn't expect anyone to be here." He smiled disarmingly. He had a charming smile, friendly, appealing. "It is rather a lonely spot," agreed Mr. Satterthwaite, as he moved politely a little further up the bench. The other accepted the mute invitation and sat down. "I don't know about lonely," he said. "There always seems to be someone here." There was a tinge of latent resentment in his voice. Mr. Satterthwaite wondered why. He read the other as a friendly soul. Why this insistence on solitude? A rendezvous, perhaps. No, not that. He looked again with carefully veiled scrutiny at his companion. Where had he seen that particular expression before, quite lately? That look of dumb, bewildered resentment. "You've been up here before, then," said Mr. Satterthwaite, more for the sake of saying something than for anything else. "I was up here last night, after dinner." "Really? I thought the gates were always locked." There was a moment's pause, and then, almost sullenly, the young man said, "I climbed over the wall." Mr. Satterthwaite looked at him with real attention now. He had a sleuth-like habit of mind, and he was aware that his companion had only arrived on the preceding afternoon. He had had little time to discover the beauty of the villa by daylight, and he had so far spoken to nobody. Yet after dark he had made straight for La Paz. Why? Almost involuntarily Mr. Satterthwaite turned his head to look at the green-shuttered villa, but it was as ever serenely lifeless, close-shuttered. No, the solution of the mystery was not there. "And you actually found someone here, then?" The other nodded. "Yes, must have been from the other hotel he had on fancy dress." "Fancy dress?" "Yes, a kind of harlequin rig." "What?" The query fairly burst from Mr. Satterthwaite's lips. His companion turned to stare at him in surprise. "They often do have fancy dress shows at the hotels, I suppose." "Oh, quite," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "Quite, quite, quite." He paused breathlessly, then added, "You must excuse my excitement. Do you happen to know anything about catalysis?" The young man stared at him. "Never heard of it. What is it?" Mr. Satterthwaite quoted gravely, "A chemical reaction depending for its success on the presence of a certain substance which itself remains unchanged." "Oh," said the young man uncertainly. "I have a certain friend. His name is Mr. Quinn, and he can best be described in the terms of catalysis. His presence is a sign that things are going to happen. Because he is there, strange revelations come to light, discoveries are made, and yet he himself takes no part in the proceedings. I have a feeling that it was my friend you met here last night. He's a very sudden sort of chap, then. He gave me quite a shock. One minute he wasn't there, and the next minute he was. Almost as though he came up out of the sea." Mr. Satterthwaite looked along the little plateau and down the sheer drop below. "That's nonsense, of course," said the other. "But it's the feeling he gave me. Of course, really, there isn't the foothold for a fly." He looked over the edge. "A straight, clear drop. If you went over, well, that would be the end right enough. An ideal spot for a murder, in fact," said Mr. Satterthwaite pleasantly. The other stared at him, almost as though for the moment he did not follow. Then he said vaguely, "Oh, yes, of course." He sat there, making little dabs at the ground with his stick and frowning. Suddenly, Mr. Satterthwaite got the resemblance he had been seeking. That dumb, bewildered questioning. So had the dog looked who was run over. His eyes, and this young man's eyes, asked the same pathetic question with the same reproach. "Oh, world that I have trusted, what have you done to me?" He saw other points of resemblance between the two, the same pleasure-loving, easy-going existence, the same joyous abandon to the delights of life, the same absence of intellectual questioning. Enough for both to live in the moment. The world was a good place, a place of carnal delights. Sun, sea, sky, a discreet garbage heap. And then, what? A car had hit the dog. What had hit the man? The subject of these cogitations broke in at this point, speaking, however, more to himself than to Mr. Satterthwaite. "One wonders," he said, "what it's all for." Familiar words, words that usually brought a smile to Mr. Satterthwaite's lips, with their unconscious betrayal of the innate egoism of humanity, which insists on regarding every manifestation of life as directly designed for its delight or its torment. He did not answer, and presently the stranger said with a slight, rather apologetic laugh, "I've heard it said that every man should build a house, plant a tree, and have a son." He paused and then added, "I believe I planted an acorn once." Mr. Satterthwaite stirred slightly. His curiosity was aroused. That ever-present interest in the affairs of other people of which the Duchess had accused him was roused. It was not difficult. Mr. Satterthwaite had a very feminine side to his nature. He was as good a listener as any woman, and he knew the right moment to put in a prompting word. Presently, he was hearing the whole story. Anthony Cosden, that was the stranger's name, and his life had been much as Mr. Satterthwaite had imagined it. He was a bad hand at telling a story, but his listener supplied the gaps easily enough. A very ordinary life, an average income, a little soldiering, a good deal of sport whenever sport offered, plenty of friends, plenty of pleasant things to do, a sufficiency of women. The kind of life that practically inhabits thought of any description and substitutes sensation. To speak frankly, an animal's life. But there are worse things than that, thought Mr. Satterthwaite from the depths of his experience. Oh, many worse things than that. This world had seemed a very good place to Anthony Cosden. He had grumbled because everyone always grumbled, but it had never been a serious grumble. And then, this. He came to it at last, rather vaguely and incoherently. Hadn't felt quite the thing, nothing much. Saw his doctor, and the doctor had persuaded him to go to a Harley Street man. And then, the incredible truth. They'd tried to hedge about it, spoke of great care, a quiet life, but they hadn't been able to disguise that was all eyewash, letting him down lightly. It boiled down to this: 6 months. That's what they gave him, 6 months. He turned those bewildered brown eyes on Mr. Satterthwaite. It was, of course, rather a shock to a fellow. One didn't somehow know what to do. Mr. Satterthwaite nodded gravely and understandingly. It was a bit difficult to take in all at once, Anthony Cosden went on. How to put in the time. Rather a rotten business waiting about to get pipped. He didn't feel really ill, not yet. Though that might come later, so the specialist had said. In fact, it was bound to. It seemed such nonsense to be going to die when one didn't in the least want to. The best thing, he had thought, would be to carry on as usual. But somehow that hadn't worked. Here Mr. Satterthwaite interrupted him. "Wasn't there," he hinted delicately, "any woman?" But apparently there wasn't. There were women, of course, but not that kind. His crowd was a very cheery crowd. They didn't, so he implied, like corpses. He didn't wish to make a kind of walking funeral of himself. It would have been embarrassing for everybody. So he had come abroad. "You came to see these islands? But why?" Mr. Satterthwaite was hunting for something intangible but delicate that eluded him, and yet which he was sure was there. "You've been here before, perhaps?" "Yes, He admitted it almost unwillingly. Years ago, when I was a youngster. And suddenly, almost unconsciously so it seemed, he shot a quick glance backward over his shoulder in the direction of the villa. I remembered this place, he said, nodding at the sea. One step to eternity. And that is why you came up here last night, finished Mr. Satterthwaite calmly. Anthony Cosden shot him a dismayed glance. Oh, I say, really, he protested. Last night you found someone here. This afternoon you have found me. Your life has been saved. Twice. You may put it that way if you like, but damn it all, it's my life. I've a right to do what I like with it. That is a cliché, said Mr. Satterthwaite wearily. Of course I see your point, said Anthony Cosden generously. Naturally, you've got to say what you can. I'd try to dissuade a fellow myself, even though I knew deep down that he was right. And you know that I'm right. A clean, quick end is better than a lingering one, causing trouble and expense and bother to all. In any case, it's not as though I had anyone in the world belonging to me. If you had, said Mr. Satterthwaite sharply. Cosden drew a deep breath. I don't know. Even then I think this way would be best. But anyway, I haven't... He stopped abruptly. Mr. Satterthwaite eyed him curiously. Incurably romantic, he suggested again that there was somewhere some woman. But Cosden negatived it. He oughtn't, he said, to complain. He had had, on the whole, a very good life. It was a pity it was going to be over so soon, that was all. But at any rate he had had, he supposed, everything worth having, except a son. He would have liked a son. He would like to know now that he had a son living after him. Still, he reiterated the fact he had had a very good life. It was at this point that Mr. Satterthwaite lost patience. Nobody, he pointed out, who was still in the larval stage, could claim to know anything of life at all. Since the words larval stage clearly meant nothing at all to Cosden, he proceeded to make his meaning clearer. You have not begun to live yet. You are still at the beginning of life. Cosden laughed. Why, my hair's grey. I'm 40. Mr. Satterthwaite interrupted him. That has nothing to do with it. Life is a compound of physical and mental experiences. I, for instance, am 69, and I am really 69. I have known, either at first or second hand, nearly all the experiences life has to offer. You're like a man who talks of a full year and has seen nothing but snow and ice. The flowers of spring, the languorous days of summer, the falling leaves of autumn, he knows nothing of them, not even that there are such things. And you are going to turn your back on even this opportunity of knowing them. You seem to forget, said Anthony Cosden dryly, that in any case I have only 6 months. Time, like everything else, is relative, said Mr. Satterthwaite. That 6 months might be the longest and most varied experience of your whole life. Cosden looked unconvinced. In my place, he said, you would do the same. Mr. Satterthwaite shook his head. No, he said simply. In the first place, I doubt if I should have the courage. It needs courage, and I am not at all a brave individual. And in the second place, well, I always want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. Cosden rose suddenly with a laugh. Well, sir, you've been very good in letting me talk to you. I hardly know why. Anyway, there it is. I've said a lot too much. Forget it. And tomorrow, when an accident is reported, I am to leave it at that? To make no suggestion of suicide? That's as you like. I'm glad you realize one thing, that you can't prevent me. My dear young man, said Mr. Satterthwaite placidly, I can hardly attach myself to you like the proverbial limpet. Sooner or later you would give me the slip and accomplish your purpose, but you are frustrated, at any rate for this afternoon. You would hardly like to go to your death, leaving me under the possible imputation of having pushed you over. That is true, said Cosden. If you insist on remaining here— I do, said Mr. Satterthwaite firmly. Cosden laughed good-humouredly. Then the plan must be deferred for the moment, in which case I will go back to the hotel. See you later, perhaps. Mr. Satterthwaite was left looking at the sea. And now, he said to himself softly. What next? There must be a next. I wonder. He got up. For a while he stood at the edge of the plateau, looking down on the dancing water beneath. But he found no inspiration there, and turning slowly he walked back along the path between the cypresses and into the quiet garden. He looked at the shuttered, peaceful house, and he wondered, as he had often wondered before, who had lived there and what had taken place within those placid walks. On a sudden impulse, he walked up some crumbling stone steps and laid a hand on one of the faded green shutters. To his surprise, it swung back at his touch. He hesitated a moment, then pushed it boldly open. The next minute, he stepped back with a little exclamation of dismay. A woman stood in the window facing him. She wore black and had a black lace mantilla draped over her head. Mr. Satterthwaite floundered wildly in Italian interspersed with German, the nearest he could get in the hurry of the moment to Spanish. He was desolated and ashamed, he explained haltingly. The signora must forgive. He thereupon retreated hastily, the woman not having spoken one word. He was halfway across the courtyard when she spoke. 2 sharp words like a pistol crack. Come back! It was a barked-out command, such as might have been addressed to a dog, yet so absolute was the authority it conveyed that Mr. Satterthwaite had swung round hurriedly and trotted back to the window almost automatically before it occurred to him to feel any resentment. He obeyed like a dog. The woman was still standing motionless at the window. She looked him up and down, appraising him with perfect calmness. You are English, she said. I thought so. Mr. Satterthwaite started off on a second apology. If I had known you were English, he said, I could have expressed myself better just now. I offer my most sincere apologies for my rudeness in trying the shutter. I'm afraid I can plead no excuse save curiosity. I had a great wish to see what the inside of this charming house was like. She laughed suddenly, a deep, rich She laughed suddenly, a deep, rich laugh. If you really want to see it, she said, you had better come in. She stood aside, and Mr. Satterthwaite, feeling pleasurably excited, stepped into the room. It was dark, since the shutters of the other windows were closed, but he could see that it was scantily and rather shabbily furnished, and that the dust lay thick everywhere. Not here, she said. I do not use this room. She led the way, and he followed her, out of the room across a passage and into a room the other side. Here the windows gave on the sea and the sun streamed in. The furniture, like that of the other room, was poor in quality, but there were some worn rugs that had been good in their time, a large screen of Spanish leather and bowls of fresh flowers. You will have tea with me, said Mr. Satterthwaite's hostess. She added reassuringly, It is perfectly good tea and will be made with boiling water. She went out of the door and called out something in Spanish. Then she returned and sat down on a sofa opposite her guest. For the first time, Mr. Satterthwaite was able to study her appearance. The first effect she had upon him was to make him feel even more grey and shriveled and elderly than usual by contrast with her own forceful personality. She was a tall woman, very sunburnt, dark and handsome, though no longer young. When she was in the room, the sun seemed to be shining twice as brightly as when she was out of it, and presently a curious feeling of warmth and aliveness began to steal over Mr. Satterthwaite. It was as though he stretched out thin, shriveled hands to a reassuring flame. He thought, she's so much vitality herself that she's got a lot left over for other people. He recalled the command in her voice when she had stopped him, and wished that his protégée Olga could be imbued with a little of that force. He thought, what an Isolde she'd make. And yet she probably hasn't got the ghost of a singing voice. Life is badly arranged. He was, all the same, a little afraid of her. He did not like domineering women. She had clearly been considering him as she sat with her chin in her hands, making no pretense about it. At last, she nodded as though she had made up her mind. I am glad you came, she said at last. I needed someone very badly to talk to this afternoon, and you are used to that, aren't you? I don't quite understand. I meant people tell you things. You knew what I meant. Why pretend? Well, perhaps. She swept on, regardless of anything he had been going to say. One could say anything to you. That is because you are half a woman. You know what we feel, what we think, the queer, queer things we do. Her voice died away. Tea was brought by a large, smiling Spanish girl. It was good tea. China. Mr. Satterthwaite sipped it appreciatively. You live here? He inquired conversationally. Yes. But not altogether. The house is usually shut up, is it not? At least so I have been told. I am here a good deal, more than anyone knows. I only use these rooms. You have had the house long? It has belonged to me for 22 years, and I lived here for a year before that. Mr. Satterthwaite said, rather inanely, or so he felt, that is a very long time. The year, or the 22 years? His interest stirred. Mr. Satterthwaite said gravely, That depends. She nodded. Yes, it depends. They are two separate periods. They have nothing to do with each other. Which is long, which is short. Even now I cannot say. She was silent for a minute, brooding. Then she said with a little smile, It is such a long time since I have talked with anyone. Such a long time. I do not apologize. You came to my shutter. You wished to look through my window. And that is what you are always doing, is it not? Pushing aside the shutter and looking through the window into the truth of people's lives. If they will let you, and often if they will not let you, it would be difficult to hide anything from you. You would guess, and guess right. Mr. Satterthwaite had an odd impulse to be perfectly sincere. I am 69, he said. Everything I know of life I know at second hand. Sometimes that is very bitter to me. And yet, because of it, I know a good deal. She nodded thoughtfully. I know. Life is very strange. I cannot imagine what it must be like to be that. Always a looker-on. Her tone was wondering. Mr. Satterthwaite smiled. No, you would not know. Your place is in the centre of the stage. You will always be the prima donna. What a curious thing to say. But I am right. Things have happened to you. Will always happen to you. Sometimes I think there have been tragic things. Is that so? Her eyes narrowed. She looked across at him. If you are here long, somebody will tell you of the English swimmer who was drowned at the foot of this cliff. They will tell you how young and strong he was, how handsome, and they will tell you that his young wife looked down from the top of the cliff and saw him drowning. Yes, I have already heard that story. That man was my husband. This was his villa. He brought me out here with him when I was 18, and a year later he died, driven by the surf on the black rocks, cut and bruised and mutilated, battered to death. Mr. Satterthwaite gave a shocked exclamation. She leant forward, her burning eyes focused on his face. You spoke of a tragedy. Can you imagine a greater tragedy than that? For a young wife, only a year married, to stand helpless, while the man she loved fought for his life, and lost it, horribly. Terrible, said Mr. Satterthwaite. He spoke with real emotion. Terrible. I agree with you. Nothing in life could be so dreadful. Suddenly she laughed. Her head went back. You are wrong, she said. There is something more terrible, and that is for a young wife to stand there and hope and long for her husband to drown. But good God, cried Mr. Satterthwaite, you don't mean— Yes, I do. That's what it was really. I knelt there, knelt down on the cliff and prayed. The Spanish servants thought I was praying for his life to be saved. I wasn't. I was praying that I might wish him to be spared. I was saying one thing over and over again, God help me not to wish him dead, God help me not to wish him dead. But it wasn't any good. All the time I hoped, and my hope came true. She was silent for a minute or two, and then she said very gently in quite a different voice, That is a terrible thing, isn't it? It's the sort of thing one can't forget. I was terribly happy when I knew he was really dead and couldn't come back to torture me any more." "My child," said Mr. Satterthwaite, shocked. "I know. I was too young to have that happen to me. Those things should happen to one when one is older, when one is more prepared for beastliness. Nobody knew, what he was really like. I thought he was wonderful when I first met him and was so happy and proud when he asked me to marry him. But things went wrong almost at once. He was angry with me. Nothing I could do pleased him, and yet I tried so hard. And then he began to like hurting me, and above all to terrify me. That's what he enjoyed most. He thought out all sorts of things. Dreadful things. I won't tell you. I suppose, really, he must have been a little mad. I was alone here in his power, and cruelty began to be his hobby." Her eyes widened and darkened. "The worst was my baby. I was going to have a baby because of some of the things he did to me. It was born dead. My little baby. I nearly died too, but I didn't. I wish I had." Mr. Satterthwaite made an inarticulate sound. "And then I was delivered. In the way I've told you. Some girls who were staying at the hotel dared him. That's how it happened. All the Spaniards told him it was madness to risk the sea just there. But he was very vain. All the Spaniards told him it was madness to risk the sea just there. But he was very vain. He wanted to show off. And I saw him drown, and was glad. God oughtn't to let such things happen." Mr. Satterthwaite stretched out his little dry hand and took hers. She squeezed it hard as a child might have done. The maturity had fallen away from her face. He saw her without difficulty as she had been at 19. At first it seemed too good to be true. The house was mine and I could live in it, and no one could hurt me any more. I was an orphan, I had no near relations, no one to care what became of me. That simplified things. I lived on here, in this villa, and it seemed like heaven. Yes, like heaven. I've never been so happy since and never shall again. Just to wake up and know that everything was all right. No pain, no terror, no wondering what he was going to do to me next. Yes, it was heaven." She paused a long time, and Mr. Satterthwaite said at last, "And then? I suppose human beings aren't ever satisfied. At first just being free was enough, but after a while I began to get, well, lonely, I suppose. I began to think about my baby that died. If only I had had my baby. I wanted it as a baby, and also as a plaything. I wanted dreadfully something or someone to play with. It sounds silly and childish, but there it was." "I understand," said Mr. Satterthwaite gravely. "It's difficult to explain the next bit. It just, happened, you see. There was a young Englishman staying at the hotel. He strayed in the garden by mistake. I was wearing Spanish dress, and he took me for a Spanish girl. I thought it would be rather fun to pretend I was one, so I played up. His Spanish was very bad, but he could just manage a little. I told him the villa belonged to an English lady who was away. I said she had taught me a little English, and I pretended to speak broken English. It was such fun, such fun. Even now I can remember what fun it was. He began to make love to me. We agreed to pretend that the villa was our home, that we were just married and coming to live there. I suggested that we should try one of the shutters, the one you tried this evening. It was open and inside the room was dusty and uncared for. We crept in. It was exciting and wonderful. We pretended it was our own house." She broke off suddenly, looked appealingly at Mr. Satterthwaite. "It all seemed lovely, like a fairy tale. And the lovely thing about it to me was that it wasn't true. It wasn't real." Mr. Satterthwaite nodded. He saw her, perhaps more clearly than she saw herself. That frightened, lonely child entranced with her make-believe that was so safe, because it wasn't real. He was, I suppose, a very ordinary young man. Out for adventure, but quite sweet about it. We went on pretending. She stopped, looked at Mr. Satterthwaite and said again, "You understand? We went on pretending." She went on again in a minute. He came up again the next morning to the villa. I saw him from my bedroom through the shutter. Of course he didn't dream I was inside. He still thought I was a little Spanish peasant girl. He stood there looking about him. He'd asked me to meet him. I'd said I would, but I never meant to. He just stood there looking worried. I think he was worried about me. It was nice of him to be worried about me. He was nice. She paused again. The next day he left. I've never seen him again. My baby was born 9 months later. I was wonderfully happy all the time. To be able to have a baby so peacefully, with no one to hurt you or make you miserable. I wished I'd remembered to ask my English boy his Christian name. I would have called the baby after him. It seemed unkind not to. It seemed rather unfair. He'd given me the thing I wanted most in the world, and he would never even know about it. But of course I told myself that he wouldn't look at it that way, that to know would probably only worry and annoy him. I had been just a passing amusement for him, that was all. "And the baby?" asked Mr. Satterthwaite. "He was splendid. I called him John." "Splendid. I wish you could see him now. He's 20. He's going to be a mining engineer. He's been the best and dearest son in the world to me. I told him his father had died before he was born." Mr. Satterthwaite stared at her. A curious story, and somehow a story that was not completely told. There was, he felt sure, something else. 20 years is a long time, he said thoughtfully. "You've never contemplated marrying again?" She shook her head. A slow, burning blush spread over her tanned cheeks. "The child was enough for you? Always?" She looked at him. Her eyes were softer than he had yet seen them. "Such queer things happen," she murmured. "Such queer things. You wouldn't believe them. No, I'm wrong. You might, perhaps. I didn't love John's father, not at the time. I don't think I even knew what love was. I assumed, as a matter of course, that the child would be like me. But he wasn't. He mightn't have been my child at all. He was like his father. He was like no one but his father. I learnt to know that man through his child. Through the child, I learnt to love him. I love him now. I always shall love him. You may say that it's imagination, that I've built up an ideal, but it isn't so. I love the man, the real, human man. I'd know him if I saw him tomorrow, even though it's over 20 years since we met. Loving him has made me into a woman. I love him as a woman loves a man. For 20 years I've lived loving him. I shall die loving him." She stopped abruptly, then challenged her listener. "Do you think I'm mad to say these strange things?" "Oh, my dear," said Mr. Satterthwaite. He took her hand again. "You do understand?" "I think I do. But there's something more, isn't there? Something that you haven't yet told me." Her brow clouded over. "Yes, there's something. It was clever of you to guess. I knew at once you weren't the sort one can hide things from. But I don't want to tell you. And the reason I don't want to tell you is because it's best for you not to know." He looked at her. Her eyes met his bravely and defiantly. He said to himself, "This is the test. All the dues are in my hand. I ought to be able to know. If I reason rightly, I shall know." There was a pause. Then he said slowly, "Something's gone wrong." He saw her eyelids give the faintest quiver and knew himself to be on the right track. "Something's gone wrong, suddenly, after all these years." He felt himself groping in the dark recesses of her mind where she was trying to hide her secret from him. The boy. It's got to do with him. You wouldn't mind about anything else? He heard the very faint gasp she gave and knew he had probed correctly. A cruel business, but necessary. It was her will against his. She had got a dominant, ruthless will, but he too had a will hidden beneath his meek manners. And he had behind him the heaven-sent assurance of a man who is doing his proper job. He felt a passing contemptuous pity for men whose business it was to track down such crudities as crime. This detective business of the mind, this assembling of dues, this delving for the truth, this wild joy as one drew nearer to the goal, Her very passion to keep the truth from him helped her. He felt her stiffen defiantly as he drew nearer and nearer. "It is better for me not to know, you say. Better for me? But you are not a very considerate woman. You would not shrink from putting a stranger to a little temporary inconvenience. It is more than that, then. If you tell me you make me an accomplice before the fact, that sounds like crime. Fantastic. I could not associate crime with you, or only one sort of crime, a crime against yourself." Her lids drooped in spite of herself, veiled her eyes. He leaned forward and caught her wrist. "It is that, then. You are thinking of taking your life." Life. She gave a low cry. "How did you know? How did you know?" "But why? You are not tired of life. I never saw a woman less tired of it, more radiantly alive." She got up, went to the window, pushing back a strand of her dark hair as she did so. "Since you have guessed so much, I might as well tell you the truth. I should not have let you in this evening. I might have known that you would see too much. You are that kind of man. You were right about the cause. It's the boy. He knows nothing. But last time he was home, he spoke tragically of a friend of his, and I discovered something. If he finds out that he is illegitimate, it will break his heart. He is proud, horribly proud. There is a girl. Oh, I won't go into details, but he is coming very soon, and he wants to know all about his father. He wants details. The girl's parents naturally want to know. When he discovers the truth, he will break with her, exile himself, ruin his life. Oh, I know the things you would say. He is young, foolish, wrong-headed to take it like that. All true, perhaps. But does it matter what people ought to be? They are what they are. It will break his heart. But if, before he comes, there has been an accident, everything will be swallowed up in grief for me. He will look through my papers, find nothing, and be annoyed that I told him so little. But he will not suspect the truth. It is the best way. One must pay for happiness, and I have had so much, oh, so much happiness. And in reality the price will be easy, too. A little courage, to take the leap, perhaps a moment or so of anguish. But, my dear child, don't argue with me. She flared round on him. I won't listen to conventional arguments. My life is my own. Up to now it has been needed, for John. But he needs it no longer. He wants a mate, a companion. He will turn to her all the more willingly because I am no longer there. My life is useless, but my death will be of use, and I have the right to do what I like with my own life. Are you sure? The sternness of his tone surprised her. She stammered slightly. If it is no good to anyone, and I am the best judge of that. He interrupted her again. Not necessarily. What do you mean? Listen, I will put a case to you. A man comes to a certain place, to commit suicide, shall we say. But by chance he finds another man there, so he fails in his purpose and goes away to live. The second man has saved the first man's life, not by being necessary to him or prominent in his life, but just by the mere physical fact of having been in a certain place at a certain moment. You take your life today, and perhaps, some 5, 6, 7 years hence, someone will go to death or disaster simply for lack of your presence in a given spot or place. It may be a runaway horse coming down a street that swerved aside at sight of you, and so fails to trample a child that is playing in the gutter. That child may live to grow up and be a great musician, or discover a cure for cancer. Or it may be less melodramatic than that he may just grow up to ordinary everyday happiness. She stared at him. You are a strange man. These things you say, I have never thought of them. You say your life is your own, went on Mr. Satterthwaite. But can you dare to ignore the chance that you are taking part in a gigantic drama under the orders of a divine producer? Your cue may not come till the end of the play. It may be totally unimportant, a mere walking-on part, but upon it may hang the issues of the play if you do not give the cue to another player. The whole edifice may crumple. You, as you, may not matter to anyone in the world, but you as a person in a particular place may matter unimaginably." She sat down, still staring. "What do you want me to do?" she said simply. It was Mr. Satterthwaite's moment of triumph. He issued orders. "I want you at least to promise me one thing, to do nothing rash for 24 hours. She was silent for a moment or two, and then she said, "I promise." "There is one other thing. A favor." "Yes?" "Leave the shutter of the room I came in by unfastened, and keep vigil there tonight." She looked at him curiously, but nodded assent. "And now," said Mr. Satterthwaite, slightly conscious of anticlimax, "I really must be going. God bless you, my dear." He made a rather embarrassed exit. The stalwart Spanish girl met him in the passage and opened a side door for him, staring curiously at him the while. It was just growing dark as he reached the hotel. There was a solitary figure sitting on the terrace. Mr. Satterthwaite made straight for it. He was excited and his heart was beating quite fast. He felt that tremendous issues lay in his hands. One false move. But he tried to conceal his agitation and to speak naturally and casually to Anthony Cosden. "A warm evening," he observed. "I quite lost count of time sitting up there on the cliff." "Have you been up there all this time?" Mr. Satterthwaite nodded. The swing door into the hotel opened to let someone through, and a beam of light fell suddenly on the other's face, illuminating its look of dull suffering, of uncomprehending, dumb endurance. Mr. Satterthwaite thought to himself, "It's worse for him than it would be for me. Imagination, conjecture, speculation, they can do a lot for you. You can, as it were, ring the changes upon pain. The uncomprehending blind suffering of an animal, that's terrible." Cosden spoke suddenly in a harsh voice. "I'm going for a stroll after dinner. You understand? The third time's lucky. For God's sake, don't interfere. I know your interference will be well-meaning and all that, but take it from me, it's useless." Mr. Satterthwaite drew himself up. "I never interfere," he said, thereby giving the lie to the whole purpose and object of his existence. "I know what you think," went on Cosden, but he was interrupted. "You must excuse me, but there I beg to differ from you," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "Nobody knows what another person is thinking. They may imagine they do, but they are nearly always wrong." "Well, perhaps that's so." Cosden was doubtful, slightly taken aback. "Thought is yours only," said his companion. "Nobody can alter or influence the use you mean to make of it. Let us talk of a less painful subject. That old villa, for instance. It has a curious charm, withdrawn, sheltered from the world, eyes shielding heaven knows what mystery. It tempted me to do a doubtful action. I tried one of the shutters." "You did?" Cosden turned his head sharply. "But it was fastened, of course?" "No," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "It was open." He added gently, "The third shutter from the end." "Why?" Cosden burst out. "That was the one—" He broke off suddenly, but Mr. Satterthwaite had seen the light that had sprung up in his eyes. He rose, satisfied. Some slight tinge of anxiety still remained with him. Using his favourite metaphor of a drama, he hoped that he had spoken his few lines correctly, for they were very important lines. But thinking it over, his artistic judgment was satisfied. On his way up to the cliff, Cosden would try that shutter. It was not in human nature to resist. A memory of 20-odd years ago had brought him to this spot. The same memory would take him to the shutter. And afterwards? "I shall know in the morning," said Mr. Satterthwaite, and proceeded to change methodically for his evening meal. It was somewhere round 10 o'clock that Mr. Satterthwaite set foot once more in the garden of La Paz. Manuel bade him a smiling "good morning," and handed him a single rosebud which Mr. Satterthwaite put carefully into his buttonhole. Then he went on to the house. He stood there for some minutes, looking up at the peaceful white walls, the trailing orange creeper and the faded green shutters. So silent, so peaceful. Had the whole thing been a dream? But at that moment one of the windows opened, and the lady who occupied Mr. Satterthwaite's thoughts came out. She came straight to him with a buoyant, swaying walk, like someone carried on a great wave of exultation, Her eyes were shining, her colour high. Exultation. Her eyes were shining, her colour high. She looked like a figure of joy on a frieze. There was no hesitation about her, no doubts or tremors. Straight to Mr. Satterthwaite she came, put her hands on his shoulders, and kissed him, not once, but many times. Large, dark red roses, very velvety. That is how he thought of it afterwards. Sunshine, summer, birds singing, that was the atmosphere into which he felt himself caught up. Warmth, joy, and tremendous vigour. "I'm so happy," she said. "You darling! How did you know? How could you know? You're like the good magician in the fairy tales." She paused, a sort of breathlessness of happiness upon her. "We're going over today, to the consul, to get married. When John comes, his father will be there. We'll tell him there was some misunderstanding in the past. Oh, he won't ask questions. Oh, I'm so happy, so happy, so happy." Happiness did indeed surge from her like a tide. It lapped round Mr. Satterthwaite in a warm, exhilarating flood. "It's so wonderful to Anthony to find he has a son. I never dreamt he'd mind or care." She looked confidently into Mr. Satterthwaite's eyes. "Isn't it strange how things come right and end all beautifully?" He had his clearest vision of her yet. A child, still a child, with her love of make-believe. Her fairy tales that ended beautifully with two people living happily ever afterwards. He said gently, "If you bring this man of yours happiness in these last months, you will indeed have done a very beautiful thing." Her eyes opened wide, surprised. "Oh," she said, "you don't think I'd let him die, do you? After all these years, when he's come to me, I've known lots of people whom doctors have given up and who are alive today. Die? Of course he's not going to die." He looked at her, her strength, her beauty, her vitality, her indomitable courage and will. He, too, had known doctors to be mistaken. The personal factor, you never knew how much and how little it counted. She said again, with scorn and amusement in her voice, "You don't think I'd let him die, do you?" "No," said Mr. Satterthwaite at last, very gently. "Somehow, my dear, I don't think you will." Then at last he walked down the cypress path to the bench overlooking the sea, and found there the person he was expecting to see. Mr. Quinn rose and greeted him, the same as ever, dark, saturnine, smiling and sad. "You expected me?" he asked. And Mr. Satterthwaite answered, "Yes, I expected you." They sat together on the bench. "I have an idea that you have been playing Providence once more, to judge by your expression," said Mr. Quinn presently. Mr. Satterthwaite looked at him reproachfully. "As if you didn't know all about it." "You always accuse me of omniscience," said Mr. Quinn, smiling. "If you know nothing, why were you here the night before last, waiting?" countered Mr. Satterthwaite. "Oh, that, yes, that. I had a commission to perform." "For whom?" "You have sometimes fancifully named me an advocate for the dead." "The dead?" said Mr. Satterthwaite, a little puzzled. "I don't understand." Mr. Quinn pointed a long, lean finger down at the blue depths below. "A man was drowned down there 22 years ago." "I know, but I don't see. Supposing that, after all, that man loved his young wife. Love can make devils of men as well as angels. She had a girlish adoration for him, but he could never touch the womanhood in her, and that drove him mad. He tortured her because he loved her. Such things happen. You know that as well as I do." "Yes," admitted Mr. Satterthwaite. "I have seen such things, but rarely, very rarely." "And you have also seen, more commonly, that there is such a thing as remorse, the desire to make amends, at all costs to make amends." "Yes, but death came too soon." "Death!" There was contempt in Mr. Quinn's voice. "You believe in a life after death, do you not? And who are you to say that the same wishes, the same desires, may not operate in that other life? If the desire is strong enough, a messenger may be found." His voice tailed away. Mr. Satterthwaite got up, trembling a little. "I must get back to the hotel," he said, "if you are going that way." But Mr. Quinn shook his head. "No," he said, "I shall go back the way I came." When Mr. Satterthwaite looked back over his shoulder, he saw his friend walking towards the edge of the cliff. Agatha Christie, The World's End. Mr. Satterthwaite had come to Corsica because of the Duchess. It was out of his beat. On the Riviera he was sure of his comforts, and to be comfortable meant a lot to Mr. Satterthwaite. But though he liked his comfort, he also liked a duchess. In his way, a harmless, gentlemanly, old-fashioned way, Mr. Satterthwaite was a snob. He liked the best people, and the Duchess of Leith was a very authentic duchess. There were no Chicago pork butchers in her ancestry. She was the daughter of a duke, as well as the wife of one. For the rest, she was rather a shabby-looking old lady, a good deal given to black bead trimmings on her clothes. She had quantities of diamonds in old-fashioned settings, and she wore them as her mother before her had worn them, pinned all over her indiscriminately. Someone had suggested once that the Duchess stood in the middle of the room whilst her maid flung brooches at her haphazard. She subscribed generously to charities and looked well after her tenants and dependents, but was extremely mean over small sums. She cadged lifts from her friends and did her shopping in bargain basements. The Duchess was seized with a whim for Corsica. Cannes bored her, and she had a bitter argument with the hotel proprietor over the price of her rooms. "And you shall go with me, Satterthwaite," she said firmly. "We needn't be afraid of scandal at our time of life." Mr. Satterthwaite was delicately flattered. No one had ever mentioned scandal in connection with him before. He was far too insignificant. Scandal and a duchess. Delicious. "Picturesque, you know," said the Duchess. "Brigands, all that sort of thing. And extremely cheap, so I've heard. Manuel was positively impudent this morning. These hotel proprietors need putting in their place. They can't expect to get the best people if they go on like this. I told him so plainly." "I believe," said Mr. Satterthwaite, "that one can fly over quite comfortably, from Antibes." "They probably charge you a pretty penny for it," said the Duchess sharply. "Find out, will you?" "Certainly, Duchess." Mr. Satterthwaite was still in a flutter of gratification, despite the fact that his role was clearly to be that of a glorified courier. When she learned the price of a passage by avion, the Duchess turned it down promptly. "They needn't think I'm going to pay a ridiculous sum like that to go in one of their nasty, dangerous things." So they went by boat, and Mr. Satterthwaite endured 10 hours of acute discomfort. To begin with, as the boat sailed at 7, he took it for granted that there would be dinner on board. But there was no dinner. The boat was small, and the sea was rough. Mr. Satterthwaite was decanted at Ajaccio in the early hours of the morning more dead than alive. The Duchess, on the contrary, was perfectly fresh. She never minded discomfort if she could feel she was saving money. She waxed enthusiastic over the scene on the quay, with the palm trees and the rising sun. The whole population seemed to have turned out to watch the arrival of the boat, and the launching of the gangway was attended with excited cries and directions. "On dirait," said a stout Frenchman who stood beside them, "que jamais avant on a fait cette manœuvre-là." "That maid of mine has been sick all night," said the Duchess. "The girl's a perfect fool." Mr. Satterthwaite smiled in a pallid fashion. "A waste of good food, I call it," continued the Duchess robustly. "Did she get any food?" asked Mr. Satterthwaite enviously. "I happened to bring some biscuits and a stick of chocolate on board with me," said the Duchess. "When I found that I happened to bring some biscuits and a stick of chocolate on board with me," said the Duchess. "When I found there was no dinner to be got, I gave the lot to her. The lower classes always make such a fuss about going without their meals." With a cry of triumph, the launching of the gangway was accomplished. A musical comedy chorus of brigands rushed aboard and wrested hand luggage from the passengers by main force. "Come on, Satterthwaite," said the Duchess. "I want a hot bath and some coffee." So did Mr. Satterthwaite. He was not wholly successful, however. They were received at the hotel by a bowing manager and were shown to their rooms. The Duchesses had a bathroom attached. Mr. Satterthwaite, however, was directed to a bath that appeared to be situated in somebody else's bedroom. To expect the water to be hot at that hour in the morning was, perhaps, unreasonable. Later he drank intensely black coffee, served in a pot without a lid. The shutters and the window of his room had been flung open, and the crisp morning air came in fragrantly. A day of dazzling blue and green. The waiter waved his hand with a flourish to call attention to the view. "Ajaccio," he said solemnly, "le plus beau port du monde." And he departed abruptly. Looking out over the deep blue of the bay with the snow mountains beyond, Mr. Satterthwaite was almost inclined to agree with him. He finished his coffee and, lying down on the bed, fell fast asleep. At déjeuner the Duchess was in great spirits. "This is just what will be good for you, Satterthwaite," she said. "Get you out of all those dusty little old maidish ways of yours." She swept a lorgnette round the room. "Upon my word, there's Naomi Carlton Smith." She indicated a girl sitting by herself at a table in the window, a round-shouldered girl who slouched as she sat. Her dress appeared to be made of some kind of brown sacking. She had black hair, untidily bobbed. "An artist?" asked Mr. Satterthwaite. He was always good at placing people. "Quite right," said the Duchess. "Calls herself one anyway. I knew she was mooching around in some queer quarter of the globe. Poor as a church mouse, proud as Lucifer, and a bee in her bonnet like all the Carlton Smiths. Her mother was my first cousin." "She's one of the Knowlton lot, then?" The Duchess nodded. "Been her own worst enemy?" she volunteered. "Clever girl, too. Mixed herself up with a most undesirable young man, one of that Chelsea crowd, wrote plays or poems or something unhealthy. Nobody took 'em, of course. Then he stole somebody's jewels and got caught out. I forget what they gave him. 5 years, I think. But you must remember, it was last winter." "Last winter I was in Egypt," he explained, Mr. Satterthwaite. "I had flu very badly the end of January, and the doctors insisted on Egypt afterwards. I missed a lot." His voice rang with a note of real regret. "That girl seems to me to be moping," said the Duchess, raising her lorgnette once more. "I can't allow that." On her way out, she stopped by Miss Carlton Smith's table and tapped the girl on the shoulder. "Well, Naomi, you don't seem to remember me." Naomi rose rather unwillingly to her feet. "Yes, I do, Duchess. I saw you come in. I thought it was quite likely you mightn't recognize me." She drawled the words lazily with a complete indifference of manner. "When you've finished your lunch, come and talk to me on the terrace," ordered the Duchess. "Very well." Naomi yawned. "Shocking manners," said the Duchess to Mr. Satterthwaite as she resumed her progress. "All the Carlton Smiths have." They had their coffee outside in the sunshine. They had been there about 6 minutes when Naomi Carlton Smith lounged out from the hotel and joined them. She let herself fall slackly onto a chair, with her legs stretched out ungracefully in front of her. An odd face, with its jutting chin and deep-set grey eyes. A clever, unhappy face. A face that only just missed being beautiful. "Well, Naomi," said the Duchess briskly, "and what are you doing with yourself?" "Oh, I don't know. Just marking time." "Been painting?" "A bit." "Show me your things." Naomi grinned. She was not cowed by the autocrat. She was amused. She went into the hotel and came out again with a portfolio. "You won't like 'em, Duchess," she said warningly. "Say what you like. You won't hurt my feelings." Mr. Satterthwaite moved his chair a little nearer. He was interested. In another minute he was more interested still. The Duchess was frankly unsympathetic. "I can't even see which way the things ought to be," she complained. "Good gracious, child, there was never a sky that colour, or a sea either." "That's the way I see 'em," said Naomi placidly. "Ugh," said the Duchess, inspecting another. "This gives me the creeps." "It's meant to," said Naomi. "You're paying me a compliment without knowing it." It was a queer vorticist study of a prickly pear, just recognizable as such. Grey-green with slodges of violent colour where the fruit glittered like jewels. A swirling mass of evil, fleshy, festering. Mr. Satterthwaite shuddered and turned his head aside. He found Naomi looking at him and nodding her head in comprehension. "I know," she said, "but if beastly—" The Duchess cleared her throat. "It seems quite easy to be an artist nowadays," she observed witheringly. "There's no attempt to copy things. You just shovel on some paint. I don't know what with. Not a brush, I'm sure." "Palette knife," interposed Naomi, smiling broadly once more. "A good deal at a time," continued the Duchess. "In lumps, and there you are. Everyone says, 'How clever.' Well, I've no patience with that sort of thing. Give me a nice picture of a dog or a horse by Edwin Landseer." "And why not?" demanded the Duchess. "What's wrong with Landseer?" "Nothing," said Naomi. "He's all right. And you're all right. The tops of things are always nice and shiny and smooth. I respect you, Duchess. You've got force. You've met life fair and square, and you've come out on top. But the people who are underneath see the underside of things. And that's interesting in a way." The Duchess stared at her. "I haven't the faintest idea what you're talking about," she declared. Mr. Satterthwaite was still examining the sketches. He realized, as the Duchess could not, the perfection of technique behind them. He was startled and delighted. He looked up at the girl. "Will you sell me one of these, Miss Carlton-Smith?" he asked. "You can have any one you like for 5 guineas, said the girl indifferently. Mr. Satterthwaite hesitated a minute or two, and then he selected a study of prickly pear and aloe. In the foreground was a vivid blur of yellow mimosa. The scarlet of the aloe flower danced in and out of the picture, and inexorable, mathematically underlying the whole, was the oblong pattern of the prickly pear and the sword motif of the aloe. He made a little bow to the girl. "I am very happy to have secured this, and I think I have made a bargain. Some day, Miss Carlton-Smith, I shall be able to sell this sketch at a very good profit, if I want to." The girl leant forward to see which one he had taken. He saw a new look come into her eyes. For the first time she was really aware of his existence, and there was respect in the quick glance she gave him. "You have chosen the best," she said. I am glad." "Well, I suppose you know what you're doing," said the Duchess. "And I dare say you're right. I've heard that you are quite a connoisseur, but you can't tell me that all this new stuff is art, because it isn't. Still, we needn't go into that. Now, I'm only going to be here a few days, and I want to see something of the island. You've got a car, I suppose, Naomi?" The girl nodded. "Excellent," said the Duchess. "We'll make a trip somewhere tomorrow. It's only a 2-seater. "Nonsense. There's a dickey, I suppose, that will do for Mr. Satterthwaite." A shuddering sigh went through Mr. Satterthwaite. He had observed the Corsican roads that morning. Naomi was regarding him thoughtfully. "I'm afraid my car would be no good to you," she said. "It's a terribly battered old bus. I bought it second-hand for a mere song. It will just get me up the hills, with coaxing. But I can't take passengers. There's quite a good garage, though, in the town. You can hire a car there." "Hire a car?" said the Duchess, scandalized. "What an idea! Who's that nice-looking man, rather yellow, who drove up in a 4-seater just before lunch?" "I expect you mean Mr. Tomlinson. He's a retired Indian judge." "That accounts for the yellowness," said the Duchess. "I was afraid it might be jaundice. He seems quite a decent sort of man. I shall talk to him." That evening, on coming down to dinner, Mr. Satterthwaite found the Duchess resplendent in black velvet and diamonds, talking earnestly to the owner of the 4-seater car. She beckoned authoritatively. "Come here, Mr. Satterthwaite. Mr. Tomlinson is telling me the most interesting things, and what do you think? He is actually going to take us an expedition tomorrow in his car." Mr. Satterthwaite regarded her with admiration. "We must go in to dinner," said the Duchess. "Do come and sit at our table, Mr. Tomlinson, and then you can go on with what you were telling me." "Quite a decent sort of man," the Duchess pronounced later. "With quite a decent sort of car," retorted Mr. Satterthwaite. "Naughty," said the Duchess, and gave him a resounding blow on the knuckles with the dingy black fan she always carried. Mr. Satterthwaite winced with pain. "Naomi is coming too," said the Duchess. In her car, that girl wants taking out of herself. She's very selfish. Not exactly self-centered, but totally indifferent to everyone and everything. Don't you agree?" "I don't think that's possible," said Mr. Satterthwaite slowly. "I mean, everyone's interest must go somewhere. There are, of course, the people who revolve round themselves, but I agree with you, she's not one of that kind. She's totally uninterested in herself. And yet she's got a strong character. There must be something. I thought at first it was her art. But it isn't. I've never met anyone so detached from life. That's dangerous." "Dangerous? What do you mean?" "Well, you see, it must mean an obsession of some kind, and obsessions are always dangerous." "Satterthwaite," said the Duchess, "don't be a fool, and listen to me. About tomorrow—" Mr. Satterthwaite listened. It was very much his role in life. They started early the following morning, taking their lunch with them. Naomi, who had been 6 months in the island, was to be the pioneer. Mr. Satterthwaite went over to her as she sat waiting to start. "You are sure that—" "I can't come with you," he said wistfully. She shook her head. "You'll be much more comfortable in the back of the other car. Nicely padded seats and all that. This is a regular old rattletrap. You'd leap in the air going over the bumps. And then, of course, the hills." Naomi laughed. "Oh, I only said that to rescue you from the dicky. The Duchess could perfectly well afford to have hired a car. She's the meanest woman in England. All the same, the old thing is rather a sport, and I can't help liking her." "Then I could come with you after all?" said Mr. Satterthwaite eagerly. She looked at him curiously. "Why are you so anxious to come with me?" "Can you ask?" Mr. Satterthwaite made his funny old-fashioned bow. She smiled but shook her head. "That isn't the reason," she said thoughtfully. "It's odd. But you can't come with me. Not today." "Another day, perhaps," suggested Mr. Satterthwaite politely. "Oh, another day," she laughed suddenly. A very queer laugh, Mr. Satterthwaite thought. "Another day well, we'll see." They started. They drove through the town and around the long curve of the bay, winding inland to cross a river and then back to the coast with its hundreds of little sandy coves. And then they began to climb. In and out, round nerve-shattering curves, upwards, ever upwards on the tortuous winding road. The blue bay was far below them, and on the other side of it Ajaccio sparkled in the sun, white like a fairy city. In and out, with a precipice first one side of them, then the other. Mr. Satterthwaite felt slightly giddy. He also felt slightly sick. The road was not very wide, and still they climbed. It was cold now. The wind came to them straight off the snow peaks. Mr. Satterthwaite turned up his coat collar and buttoned it tightly under his chin. It was very cold. Across the water Ajaccio was still bathed in sunlight, but up here thick grey clouds came drifting across the face of the sun. Mr. Satterthwaite ceased to admire the view. He yearned for a steam-heated hotel and a comfortable armchair. Ahead of them, Naomi's little two-seater drove steadily forward. Up, still up. They were on top of the world now. On either side of them were lower hills, hills sloping down to valleys. They looked straight across to the snow peaks, and the wind come tearing over them, sharp, like a knife. Suddenly Naomi's car stopped, and she looked back. "We've arrived," she said, "at the world's end, and I don't think it's an awfully good day for it." They all got out. They had arrived in a tiny village with half a dozen stone cottages. An imposing name was printed in letters a foot high. Corte Chiaveri. Naomi shrugged her shoulders. "That's its official name, but I prefer to call it the World's End." She walked on a few steps, and Mr. Satterthwaite joined her. They were beyond the houses now. The road stopped. As Naomi had said, this was the end, the back of beyond, the beginning of nowhere. Behind them, the white ribbon of the road in front of them. Nothing. Only far, far below the sea. Mr. Satterthwaite drew a deep breath. "It's an extraordinary place." One feels that anything might happen here, that one might meet. Anyone. He stopped, for just in front of them a man was sitting on a boulder, his face turned to the sea. They had not seen him till this moment, and his appearance had the suddenness of a conjuring trick. He might have sprung from the surrounding landscape. "I wonder—" began Mr. Satterthwaite. But at that minute the stranger turned, and Mr. Satterthwaite saw his face. "Why, Mr. Quinn! How extraordinary! Miss Carleton-Smith, I want to introduce my friend Mr. Quinn to you. He's the most unusual fellow. You are, you know. You always turn up in the nick of time." He stopped with the feeling that he had said something awkwardly significant, and yet for the life of him he could not think what it was. Naomi had shaken hands with Mr. Quinn in her usual abrupt style. "We are here for a picnic," she said, "and it seems to me we shall be pretty well frozen to the bone." Mr. Satterthwaite shivered. "Perhaps," he said uncertainly, "we shall find a sheltered spot." "Which this isn't," agreed Naomi. "Still, it's worth seeing, isn't it?" "Yes, indeed." Mr. Satterthwaite turned to Mr. Quinn. "Miss Carleton-Smith calls this place the World's End. Rather a good name, eh?" Mr. Quinn nodded his head slowly several times. "Yes, a very suggestive name. I suppose one only comes once in one's life to a place like that, a place where one can't go on any longer." "What do you mean?" asked Naomi sharply. He turned to her. "Well, usually there's a choke, isn't there? To the right or to the left? Forward or back? Here, there's the road behind you and in front of you. Nothing." Naomi stared at him. Suddenly she shivered and began to retrace her steps towards the others. The two men fell in beside her. Mr. Quinn continued to talk, but his tone was now easily conversational. "Is the small car yours, Miss Carleton-Smith?" "Yes." "You drive yourself? One needs, I think, a good deal of nerve to do that round here. The turns are rather appalling. A moment of inattention, a brake that failed to hold, and over the edge, down, down, down. It would be very easily done." They had now joined the others. Mr. Satterthwaite introduced his friend. He felt a tug at his arm. It was Naomi. She drew him apart from the others. "Who is he?" she demanded fiercely. Mr. Satterthwaite gazed at her in astonishment. "Well," Mr. Satterthwaite gazed at her in astonishment. "Well, I hardly know. I mean, I have known him for some years now. We have run across each other from time to time. But in the sense of knowing, actually—" He stopped. These were futilities that he was uttering, and the girl by his side was not listening. She was standing with her head bent down, her hands clenched by her sides. "He knows things," she said. "He knows things." "How does he know?" Mr. Satterthwaite had no answer. He could only look at her dumbly, unable to comprehend a die-storm that shook her. "I'm afraid," she muttered. "Afraid of Mr. Quinn?" "I'm afraid of his eyes. He sees things." Something cold and wet fell on Mr. Satterthwaite's cheek. He looked up. "Why, it's snowing," he exclaimed in great surprise. "A nice day to have chosen for a picnic," said Naomi. She had regained control of herself with an effort. What was to be done? A babel of suggestions broke out. The snow came down thick and fast. Mr. Quinn made a suggestion, and everyone welcomed it. There was a little stone casicroot at the end of the row of houses. There was a stampede towards it. "You have your provisions," said Mr. Quinn, "and they will probably be able to make you some coffee." It was a tiny place, rather dark, for the one little window did little towards lighting it, but from one end came a grateful glow of warmth. An old Corsican woman was just throwing a handful of branches on the fire. It blazed up, and by its light the newcomers realized that others were before them. 3 people were sitting at the end of a bare wooden table. There was something unreal about the scene to Mr. Satterthwaite's eye. There was something even more unreal about the people. The woman who sat at the end of the table looked like a duchess. That is, she looked more like a popular conception of a duchess. She was the ideal stage grande dame. Her aristocratic head was held high, her exquisitely dressed hair was of a snowy white. She was dressed in grey, soft draperies that fell about her in artistic folds. One long white hand supported her chin, the other was holding a roll spread with pâté de foie gras. On her right was a man with a very white face, very black hair, and horn-rimmed spectacles. He was marvellously and beautifully dressed. At the moment his head was thrown back, and his left arm was thrown out as though he were about to declaim something. On the left of the white-haired lady was a jolly-looking little man with a bald head. After the first glance, nobody looked at him. There was just a moment of uncertainty, and then the Duchess, the authentic Duchess, took charge. "Isn't this storm too dreadful?" she said pleasantly, coming forward and smiling a purposeful and efficient smile that she had found very useful when serving on welfare and other committees. "I suppose you've been caught in it just like we have. But Corsica is a marvellous place. I only arrived this morning." The man with the black hair got up, and the Duchess with a gracious smile slipped into his seat. The white-haired lady spoke. "We have been here a week," she said. Mr. Satterthwaite started. Could anyone who had once heard that voice ever forget it? It echoed round the stone room, charged with emotion, with exquisite melancholy. It seemed to him that she had said something wonderful, memorable, full of meaning. She had spoken from her heart. He spoke in a hurried aside to Mr. Tomlinson. "The man in spectacles is Mr. Vyse, the producer, you know." The retired Indian judge was looking at Mr. Vyse with a good deal of dislike. "What does he produce?" he asked. "Children?" "Oh, dear me, no," said Mr. Satterthwaite, shocked by the mere mention of anything so crude in connection with Mr. Vyse. "Plays." "I think," said Naomi, "I'll go out again. It's too hot in here." Her voice, strong and harsh, made Mr. Satterthwaite jump. She made almost blindly, as it seemed, for the door, brushing Mr. Tomlinson aside. But in the doorway itself, she came face to face with Mr. Quinn, and he barred her way. "Go back and sit down," he said. His voice was authoritative. To Mr. Satterthwaite's surprise, the girl hesitated a minute and then obeyed. She sat down at the foot of the table as far from the others as possible. Mr. Satterthwaite bustled forward and buttonholed the producer. "You may not remember me," he began. "My name is Satterthwaite." "Of course." A long, bony hand shot out and enveloped the others in a painful grip. "My dear man, fancy meeting you here. You know Miss Nunn, of course?" Mr. Satterthwaite jumped. No wonder that voice had been familiar. Thousands, all over England, had thrilled to those wonderful emotion-laden tones. Rosina Nunn, England's greatest emotional actress. Mr. Satterthwaite, too, had lain under her spell. No one like her for interpreting a part, for bringing out the finer shades of meaning. He had thought of her always as an intellectual actress, one who comprehended and got inside the soul of her part. He might be excused for not recognizing her. Rosina Nunn was volatile in her tastes. For 25 years of her life she had been a blonde. After a tour in the States she had returned with the locks of the raven, and she had taken up tragedy in earnest. This French marquise effect was her latest whim. "Oh, by the way, Mr. Judd, Miss Nunn's husband," said Vyse, carelessly introducing the man with the bald head. Rosina Nunn had had several husbands, Mr. Satterthwaite knew. Mr. Judd was evidently the latest. Mr. Judd was busily unwrapping packages from a hamper at his side. He addressed his wife. "Some more pâté, dearest? That last wasn't as thick as you like it." Rosina Nunn surrendered her roll to him as she murmured simply, "Henry thinks of the most enchanting meals. I always leave the commissariat to him." "Feed the brute," said Mr. Judd, and laughed. He patted his wife on the shoulder. "Treats her just as though she were a dog," murmured the melancholy voice of Mr. Vyse in Mr. Satterthwaite's car. "Cuts up her food for her. Odd creatures, women." Mr. Satterthwaite and Mr. Quinn between them unpacked lunch. Hard-boiled eggs, cold ham and Gruyere cheese were distributed round the table. The Duchess and Miss Nunn appeared to be deep in murmured confidences. Fragments came along in the actress's deep contralto. "The bread must be lightly toasted, you understand. Then just a very thin layer of marmalade, rolled up and put in the oven for 1 minute, not more. Simply delicious. That woman lives for food, murmured Mr. Vyse. Simply lives for it. She can't think of anything else. I remember in Riders to the Sea, you know, and it's the fine quiet time I'll be having. I could not get the effect I wanted. At last I told her to think of peppermint creams. She's very fond of peppermint creams. I got the effect at once, a sort of faraway look that went to your very soul. Mr. Satterthwaite was silent. He was remembering. Mr. Tomlinson opposite cleared his throat preparatory to entering into conversation. You produce plays, I hear, eh? I'm fond of a good play myself. Jim the Penman. Now that was a play. My God, said Mr. Vyse, and shivered down all the long length of him. A tiny clove of garlic, said Miss Nunn to the Duchess. You tell your cook. It's wonderful. She sighed happily and turned to her husband. Henry, she said plaintively, I've never even seen the caviar. You're as near as nothing to sitting on it, returned Mr. Judd cheerfully. You put it behind you on the chair. Rosina Nunn retrieved it hurriedly and beamed round the table. Henry is too wonderful. I'm so terribly absent-minded. I never know where I've put anything. Like the day you packed your pears in your sponge bag, said Henry jocosely, and then left it behind at the hotel. My word, I did a bit of wiring and phoning that day. They were insured, said Miss Nunn dreamily. Not like my opal. A spasm of exquisite heart-rending grief flitted across her face. Several times, when in the company of Mr. Quinn, Mr. Satterthwaite had had the feeling of taking part in a play. The illusion was with him very strongly now. This was a dream. Everyone had his part. The words, my opal, were his only now. This was a dream. Everyone had his part. The words, my opal, were his own cue. He leant forward. Your opal, Miss Nunn? Have you got the butter, Henry? Thank you. Yes, my opal. It was stolen, you know, and I never got it back. Do tell us, said Mr. Satterthwaite. Well, I was born in October, so it was lucky for me to wear opals, and because of that I wanted a real beauty. I waited a long time for it. They said it was one of the most perfect ones known. Not very large, about the size of a 2-shilling piece, but oh, the colour and the fire. She sighed. Mr. Satterthwaite observed that the Duchess was fidgeting and seemed uncomfortable, but nothing could stop Miss Nunn now. She went on, and the exquisite inflections of her voice made the story sound like some mournful saga of old. It was stolen by a young man called Alec Gerard. He wrote plays. Very good plays, put in Mr. Vyse professionally. Why, I once kept one of his plays for 6 months. Did you produce it? Asked Mr. Tomlinson. Oh, no, said Mr. Vyse, shocked at the idea. But do you know, at one time I actually thought of doing so. It had a wonderful part in it for me, said Miss Nunn. Rachel's Children, it was called, though there wasn't anyone called Rachel in the play. He came to talk to me about it, at the theatre. I liked him. He was a nice-looking, and very shy, poor boy. I remember. A beautiful, faraway look stole over her face. He bought me some peppermint creams. The opal was lying on the dressing-table. He'd been out in Australia, and he knew something about opals. He took it over to the light to look at it. I suppose he must have slipped it into his pocket then. I missed it as soon as he'd gone. There was a to-do. You remember? She turned to Mr. Vyse. Oh, I remember, said Mr. Vyse with a groan. They found the empty case in his rooms, continued the actress. He'd been terribly hard up, but the very next day he was able to pay large sums into his bank. He pretended to account for it by saying that a friend of his had put some money on a horse for him, but he couldn't produce the friend. He said he must have put the case in his pocket by mistake. I think that was a terribly weak thing to say, don't you? He might have thought of something better than that. I had to go and give evidence. There were pictures of me in all the papers. My press agent said it was very good publicity, but I'd much rather have had my opal back. She shook her head sadly. Have some preserved pineapple? Said Mr. Judd. Miss Nunn brightened up. Where is it? I gave it to you just now. Miss Nunn looked behind her and in front of her, eyed her grey silk pochette. and then slowly drew up a large purple silk bag that was reposing on the ground beside her. She began to turn the contents out slowly on the table, much to Mr. Satterthwaite's interest. There was a powder puff, a lipstick, a small jewel case, a skein of wool, another powder puff, 2 handkerchiefs, a box of chocolate creams, an enamelled paper knife, a mirror, a little dark brown wooden box, 5 letters, a walnut, a small square of mauve crêpe de chine, a piece of ribbon, and the end of a croissant. Last of all came the preserved pineapple. "Eureka!" murmured Mr. Satterthwaite softly. "I beg your pardon?" "Nothing," said Mr. Satterthwaite hastily. "What a charming paper knife." "Yes, isn't it? Somebody gave it to me. I can't remember who." "That's an Indian box," remarked Mr. Tomlinson. "Ingenious little things, aren't they?" "Somebody gave me that too," said Miss Nunn. "I've had it a long time. It used always to stand on my dressing table at the theatre. I don't think it's very pretty, though, do you?" The box was of plain, dark brown wood. It pushed open from the side. On the top of it were 2 plain flaps of wood that could be turned round and round. "Not pretty, perhaps," said Mr. Tomlinson with a chuckle, "but I'll bet you've never seen one like it." Mr. Satterthwaite leaned forward. He had an excited feeling. "Why did you say it was ingenious?" he demanded. "Well, isn't it?" The judge appealed to Miss Nunn. She looked at him blankly. "I suppose I mustn't show them the trick of it, eh?" Miss Nunn still looked blank. "What trick?" asked Mr. Judd. "God bless my soul, don't you know?" He looked round the inquiring faces. "Fancy that now. May I take the box a minute? Thank you." He pushed it open. "Now then, can anyone give me something to put in it? Not too big. Here's a small piece of Gruyere cheese. That will do capitally. I place it inside, shut the box." He fumbled for a minute or two with his hands. "Now, see, He opened the box again. It was empty. "Well, I never," said Mr. Judd. "How do you do it?" "It's quite simple. Turn the box upside down and move the left-hand flap halfway round, then shut the right-hand flap. Now, to bring our piece of cheese back again, we must reverse that. The right-hand flap halfway round and the left one closed, still keeping the box upside down. And now, hey, presto!" The box slid open. A gasp went round the table. The cheese was there, but so was something else. A round thing that blinked forth every colour of the rainbow. My God! It was a clarion note. Rosina Nunn stood upright, her hands clasped to her breast. "My opal! How did it get there?" Henry Judd cleared his throat. I rather think, Rosie, my girl, you must have put it there yourself." Someone got up from the table and blundered out into the air. It was Naomi Carlton Smith. Mr. Quinn followed her. "But when? Do you mean—" Mr. Satterthwaite watched her while the truth dawned on her. It took over 2 minutes before she got it. "You mean last year at the theatre?" "You know," said Henry apologetically. "You do fiddle with things, Rosie. Look at you with the caviar today." Miss Nunn was painfully following out her mental processes. "I just slipped it in without thinking, and then I suppose I turned the box about and did the thing by accident. But then, at last it came. But then Alec Gerard didn't steal it after all. Oh," a full-throated cry, poignant, moving. "How dreadful!" "Well," said Mr. Vyse, "that can be put right now." "Yes, but he's been in prison a year." And then she startled them. She turned sharp on the Duchess. "Who is that girl who has just gone out?" "Miss Carlton Smith," said the Duchess, "was engaged to Mr. Gerard. She took the thing very hard." Mr. Satterthwaite stole softly away. The snow had stopped. Naomi was sitting on the stone wall. She had a sketchbook in her hand. Some coloured crayons were scattered around. Mr. Quinn was standing beside her. She held out the sketchbook to Mr. Satterthwaite. It was a very rough affair, but it had genius. A kaleidoscopic whirl of snowflakes with a figure in the centre. "Very good," said Mr. Satterthwaite. Mr. Quinn looked up at the sky. "The storm is over," he said. "The roads will be slippery, but I do not think there will be any accident. Now." "There will be no accident," said Naomi. Her voice was charged with some meaning that Mr. Satterthwaite did not understand. She turned and smiled at him, a sudden dazzling smile. "Mr. Satterthwaite can drive back with me if he likes." He knew then to what length desperation had driven her. "Well," said Mr. Quinn, "I must bid you good-bye." He moved away. "Where is he going?" said Mr. Satterthwaite, staring after him. "Back where he came from, I suppose," said Naomi in an odd voice. But there isn't anything there," said Mr. Satterthwaite, for Mr. Quinn was making for that spot on the edge of the cliff where they had first seen him. "You know you said yourself it was the world's end." He handed back the sketchbook. "It's very good," he said. "A very good likeness. But why did you put him in fancy dress?" Her eyes met his for a brief second. "I see him like that," said Naomi Carlton-Smith. "Agatha Christie," the voice in the dark. "I am a little worried about Marjorie," said Lady Stranley. "My girl, you know," she added. She sighed pensively. "It makes one feel terribly old to have a grown-up daughter." Mr. Satterthwaite, who was the recipient of these confidences, rose to the occasion gallantly. "No one could believe it possible," he declared with a little bow. "Flatterer," said Lady Stranley, but she said it vaguely, and it was clear that her mind was elsewhere. Mr. Satterthwaite looked at the slender white-clad figure in some admiration. The can of sunshine was searching, but Lady Stranley came through the test very well. At a distance the youthful effect was really extraordinary. One almost wondered if she were grown up or not. Mr. Satterthwaite, who knew everything, knew that it was perfectly possible for Lady Stranley to have grown-up grandchildren. She represented the extreme triumph of art over nature. Her figure was marvellous, her complexion was marvellous. She had enriched many beauty parlours, and certainly the results were astounding. Lady Stranley lit a cigarette, crossed her beautiful legs encased in the finest of nude silk stockings, and murmured, "Yes, I really am rather worried about Marjorie." "Dear me," said Mr. Satterthwaite, "what is the trouble?" Lady Stranley turned her beautiful blue eyes upon him. "You have never met her, have you? She is Charles's daughter," she added helpfully. If entries in Who's Who were strictly truthful, the entries concerning Lady Stranley might have ended as follows: hobbies, getting married. She had floated through life shedding husbands as she went. She had lost 3 by divorce and 1 by death. "If she had been Rudolph's child, I could have understood it," mused Lady Stranley. "You remember Rudolph. He was always temperamental. 6 months after we married, I had to apply for those queer things. What do they call them? Conjugal. What nots? You know what I mean. Thank goodness it is all much simpler nowadays. I remember I had to write him the silliest kind of letter. My lawyer practically dictated it to me, asking him to come back, you know, and that I would do all I could, etc., etc., but you never could count on Rudolph. He was so temperamental. He came rushing home at once, which was quite the wrong thing to do, and not all what the lawyers meant." She sighed. "About Marjorie?" suggested Mr. Satterthwaite, tactfully leading her back to the subject under discussion. "Of course. I was just going to tell you, wasn't I? Marjorie has been seeing things, or hearing them. Ghosts, you know, and all that. I should never have thought that Marjorie could be so imaginative. She is a dear good girl, always has been, but just a shade dull." "Impossible," murmured Mr. Satterthwaite with a confused idea of being complimentary. "In fact, very dull," said Lady Stranley. "Doesn't care for dancing or cocktails or any of the things a young girl ought to care about. She much prefers staying at home to hunt instead of coming out here with me." "Dear, dear," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "She wouldn't come out with you, you say?" "Well, I didn't exactly press her. Daughters have a depressing effect upon one, I find." Mr. Satterthwaite tried to think of Lady Stranley accompanied by a serious-minded daughter, and failed. "I can't help wondering if Marjorie is going off her head," continued Marjorie's mother in a cheerful voice. "Hearing voices is a very bad sign, so they tell me. It is not as though Abbott's Mead were haunted. The old building was burnt to the ground in 1836, and they put up a kind of early Victorian chateau which simply cannot be haunted. It is much too ugly and commonplace." Mr. Satterthwaite coughed. He was wondering why he was being told all this. "I thought perhaps," said Lady Stranley, smiling brilliantly upon him, "that you might be able to help me." "I?" "Yes. You are going back to England tomorrow, aren't you?" "I am. Yes, that is so," admitted Mr. Satterthwaite cautiously. "And you know all these psychical research people. Of course you do. You know everybody." Mr. Satterthwaite smiled a little. It was one of his weaknesses to know everybody. "So what can be simpler?" continued Lady Stranley. "I never get on with that sort of person. You know, earnest men with beards and usually spectacles. They bore me terribly, and I'm quite at my worst with them." Mr. Satterthwaite was rather taken aback. Lady Stranley continued to smile at him brilliantly. "So that is all settled, isn't it?" she said brightly. "You will go down to Abbott's Mead and see Marjorie and make all the arrangements. I shall be terribly grateful to you. Of course, if Marjorie is really going off her head, I will come home. Ah, here is Bimbo." Her smile from being brilliant became dazzling. A young man in white tennis flannels was approaching them. He was about 25 years of age and extremely good-looking. The young man said simply, "I have been looking for you everywhere, Babs. What has the tennis been like?" "Septic." Lady Stranley rose. She turned her head over her shoulder and murmured in dulcet tones to Mr. Satterthwaite, "It is simply marvellous of you to help me. I shall never forget it." Mr. Satterthwaite looked after the retreating couple. "I wonder," he mused to himself, "if Bimbo is going to be number 5? 2. The conductor of the train de luxe was pointing out to Mr. Satterthwaite where an accident on the line had occurred a few years previously. As he finished his spirited narrative, the other looked up and saw a well-known face smiling at him over the conductor's shoulder. "My dear Mr. Quinn," said Mr. Satterthwaite. His little withered face broke into smiles. "What a coincidence, that we should both be returning to England on the same train. You are going there, I suppose?" "Yes," said Mr. Quinn. "I have business there of rather an important nature. Are you taking the first service of dinner?" "I always do so. Of course it is an absurd time, 6:30, but one runs less risk with the cooking." Mr. Quinn nodded comprehendingly. "I also," he said. "We might perhaps arrange to sit together." 6:30 found Mr. Quinn and Mr. Satterthwaite established opposite each other at a small table in the dining car. Mr. Satterthwaite gave due attention to the wine list and then turned to his companion. "I have not seen you since—" "Ah, yes, not since Corsica. You left very suddenly that day." Mr. Quinn shrugged his shoulders. "Not more so than usual. I come and go, you know. I come and go." The words seemed to awake some echo of remembrance in Mr. Satterthwaite's mind. A little shiver passed down his spine, not a disagreeable sensation, quite the contrary. He was conscious of a pleasurable sense of anticipation. Mr. Quinn was holding up a bottle of red wine, examining the label on it. The bottle was between him and the light, but for a minute or two a red glow enveloped his person. Mr. Satterthwaite felt again that sudden stir of excitement. "I too have a kind of mission in England," he remarked, smiling broadly at the remembrance. "You know Lady Stranley, perhaps?" Mr. Quinn shook his head. "It is an old title," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "A very old title, one of the few that can descend in the female line. She is a baroness in her own right. Rather a romantic history, really." Mr. Quinn settled himself more comfortably in his chair. A waiter, flying down the swinging car, deposited cups of soup before them as if by a miracle. Mr. Quinn sipped it cautiously. "You're about to give me one of those wonderful descriptive portraits of yours," he murmured. "That is so, is it not?" Mr. Satterthwaite beamed on him. "She is really a marvellous woman," he said. 60, you know, Yes, I should say at least 60. I knew them as girls, she and her sister. Beatrice. That was the name of the elder one. Beatrice and Barbara. I remember them as the Baron girls, both good-looking and in those days very hard up. But that was a great many years ago. Why, dear me, I was a young man myself then. Mr. Satterthwaite sighed. There were several lives then between them, and Satterthwaite sighed. There were several lives then between them and the title. Old Lord Stranley was a first cousin once removed. I think Lady Stranley's life has been quite a romantic affair. 3 unexpected deaths, 2 of the old man's brothers and a nephew. Then there was the Euralia. You remember the wreck of the Euralia? She went down off the coast of New Zealand. The Baron girls were on board. Beatrice was drowned. This one, Barbara, was amongst the few survivors. 6 months later, old Stranley died, and she succeeded to the title and came into a considerable fortune. Since then she has lived for one thing only, herself. She has always been the same, beautiful, unscrupulous, completely callous, interested solely in herself. She has had 4 husbands, and I have no doubt could get a 5th in a minute. He went on to describe the mission with which he had been entrusted by Lady Stranley. I thought of running down to Abbott's Mead to see the young lady, he explained. I feel that something ought to be done about the matter. It is impossible to think of Lady Stranley as an ordinary mother. He stopped, looking across the table at Mr. Quinn. I wish you would come with me, he said wistfully. Would it not be possible? I'm afraid not, said Mr. Quinn. But let me check. Abbott's Mead is in Wiltshire, is it not? Mr. Satterthwaite nodded. I thought as much. As it happens, I shall be staying not far from Abbott's Mead, at a place you and I both know. He smiled. You remember that little inn? The Bells and Motley? Of course, cried Mr. Satterthwaite. You will be there? Mr. Quinn nodded. For a week or 10 days, possibly longer. If you will come and look me up one day, I shall be delighted to see you. And somehow or other Mr. Satterthwaite felt strangely comforted by the assurance. 3. My dear Miss, Marjorie, said Mr. Satterthwaite, I assure you that I should not dream of laughing at you. Marjorie Gale frowned a little. They were sitting in the large, comfortable hall of Abbott's Mead. Marjorie Gale was a big, squarely built girl. She bore no resemblance to her mother, but took entirely after her father's side of the family, a line of hard-riding country squires. She looked fresh and wholesome, and the picture of sanity. Nevertheless, Mr. Satterthwaite was reflecting to himself that the Barons as a family were all inclined to mental instability. Marjorie might have inherited her physical appearance from her father, and at the same time have inherited some mental kink from her mother's side of the family. I wish, said Marjorie, that I could get rid of that Casson woman. I don't believe in spiritualism, and I don't like it. She is one of these silly women that run a craze to death. She is always bothering me to have a medium down here. Mr. Satterthwaite coughed, fidgeted a little in his chair, and then said in a judicial manner, Let me be quite sure that I have all the facts. The first of the phenomena occurred 2 months ago, I understand. About that, agreed the girl. Sometimes it was a whisper, and sometimes it was quite a clear voice, but it always said much the same thing. Which was, Give back what is not yours. Give back what you have stolen. On each occasion I switched on the light, but the room was quite empty and there was no one there. In the end, I got so nervous that I got Clayton, Mother's maid, to sleep on the sofa in my room. And the voice came just the same? Yes, and this is what frightens me. Clayton did not hear it. Mr. Satterthwaite reflected for a minute or two. Did it come loudly or softly that evening? It was almost a whisper, admitted Marjorie. If Clayton was sound asleep, I suppose she would not really have heard it. She wanted me to see a doctor. The girl laughed bitterly. But since last night, even Clayton believes, she continued. What happened last night? I am just going to tell you. I have told no one as yet. I had been out hunting yesterday and we had had a long run. I was dead tired and slept very heavily. I dreamt, a horrible dream, that I had fallen over some iron railings and that one of the spikes was entering slowly into my throat. I woke to find that it was true. There was some sharp point pressing into the side of my neck, and at the same time a voice was murmuring softly, "Yon have stolen what is mine. This is death." I screamed, continued Marjorie, and clutched at the air, but there was nothing there. Clayton heard me scream from the room next door where she was sleeping. She came rushing in, and she distinctly felt something brushing past her in the darkness, but she says that whatever that something was, it was not anything human. Mr. Satterthwaite stared at her. The girl was obviously very shaken and upset. He noticed on the left side of her throat a small square of sticking plaster. She caught the direction of his gaze and nodded. "Yes," she said. "It was not imagination, you see." Mr. Satterthwaite put a question almost apologetically. It sounded so melodramatic. "You don't know of anyone, who has a grudge against you?" he asked. "Of course not," said Marjorie. "What an idea!" Mr. Satterthwaite started on another line of attack. "What visitors have you had during the last 2 months? You don't mean just people for weekends, I suppose? Marcia Keene has been with me all along. She's my best friend and just as keen on horses as I am. Then my cousin Rowley Vavasor has been here a good deal." Mr. Satterthwaite nodded. He suggested that he should see Clayton, the maid. "She has been with you a long time, I suppose?" he asked. "Donkey's years," said Marjorie. "She was Mother's and Aunt Beatrice's maid when they were girls. That is why Mother has kept her on, I suppose, although she has got a French maid for herself. Clayton does sewing and pottering, little odd jobs." She took him upstairs, and presently Clayton came to them. She was a tall, thin old woman, with grey hair neatly parted, and she looked the acme of respectability. "No, sir," she said in answer to Mr. Satterthwaite's inquiries. "I have never heard anything of the house being haunted. To tell you the truth, sir, I thought it was all Miss Marjorie's imagination until last night, but I actually felt something, brushing by me in the darkness. And I can tell you this, sir, it was not anything human. And then there is that wound in Miss Marjorie's neck. She didn't do that herself, poor lamb." But her words were suggestive to Mr. Satterthwaite. Was it possible that Marjorie could have inflicted that wound herself? He had heard of strange cases where girls apparently just as sane and well-balanced as Marjorie had done the most amazing things. "It will soon heal up," said Clayton. "It's not like this scar of mine." She pointed to a mark on her own forehead. "That was done 40 years ago, sir. I still bear the mark of it." "It was the time the Euralia went down," put in Marjorie. "Clayton was hit on the head by a spar, weren't you, Clayton?" "Yes, miss." "What do you think yourself, Clayton?" asked Mr. Satterthwaite. "What do you think was the meaning of this attack on Miss Marjorie?" "I really should not like to say, sir." Mr. Satterthwaite read this correctly, as the reserve of the well-trained servant. "What do you really think, Clayton?" he said persuasively. "I think, sir, that something very wicked must have been done in this house, and that until that is wiped out, there won't be any peace." The woman spoke gravely, and her faded blue eyes met his steadily. Mr. Satterthwaite went downstairs rather disappointed. Clayton evidently held the orthodox view, a deliberate haunting as a consequence of some evil deed in the past. Mr. Satterthwaite himself was not so easily satisfied. The phenomena had only taken place in the last 2 months. Had only taken place since Marcia Keene and Rowley Vavasor had been there. He must find out something about these two. It was possible that the whole thing was a practical joke, but he shook his head, dissatisfied with that solution. The thing was more sinister than that. The post had just come in, and Marjorie was opening and reading her letters. Suddenly she gave an exclamation. "Mother is too absurd," she said. "Do read." Suddenly she gave an exclamation. "Mother is too absurd," she said. "Do read this." She handed the letter to Mr. Satterthwaite. It was an epistle typical of Lady Stranley. "Darling Marjorie," she wrote, "I am so glad you have that nice little Mr. Satterthwaite there. He is awfully clever and knows all the big-wig spook people. You must have them all down and investigate things thoroughly. I am sure you will have a perfectly marvellous time, and I only wish I could be there, but I have really been quite ill the last few days. The hotels are so careless about the— Sweet of you to send me the chocolates, darling, but surely just a well bit silly, wasn't it? I mean, there's such wonderful confectionery out here. Bye-bye, darling, and have a lovely time laying the family ghosts. Bimbo says my tennis is coming on marvellously. Oceans of love. Yours, Barbara. Mother always wants me to call her Barbara, said Marjorie. Simply silly, I think. Mr. Satterthwaite smiled a little. He realized that the stolid conservatism of her daughter must on occasions be very trying to Lady Stranley. The contents of her letter struck him in a way in which obviously they did not strike Marjorie. "Did you send your mother a box of chocolates?" he asked. Marjorie shook her head. "No, I didn't. It must have been someone else." Mr. Satterthwaite looked grave. Two things struck him as of significance. Lady Stranley had received a gift of a box of chocolates, and she was suffering from a severe attack of poisoning. Apparently she had not connected these two things. Was there a connection? He himself was inclined to think there was. A tall, dark girl lounged out of the morning room and joined them. She was introduced to Mr. Satterthwaite as Marcia Keene. She smiled on the little man in an easy, good-humoured fashion. "Have you come down to hunt Marjorie's pet ghost?" she asked in a drawling voice. "We all rot her about that ghost. Hello, here's Rowley." A car had just drawn up at the front door. Out of it tumbled a tall young man with fair hair and an eager, boyish manner. "Hello, Marjorie," he cried. "Hello, Marcia. I've brought down reinforcements." He turned to the two women who were just entering the hall. Mr. Satterthwaite recognized in the first one of the two the Mrs. Casson of whom Marjorie had spoken just now. "You must forgive me, Marjorie, dear," she drawled, smiling broadly. "Mr. Vavasor told us that it would be quite all right. It was really his idea that I should bring down Mrs. Lloyd with me." She indicated her companion with a slight gesture of the hand. "This is Mrs. Lloyd," she said in a tone of triumph. "Simply the most wonderful medium that ever existed." Mrs. Lloyd uttered no modest protest. She bowed and remained with her hands crossed in front of her. She was a highly coloured young woman of commonplace appearance. Her clothes were unfashionable but rather ornate. She wore a chain of moonstones and several rings. Marjorie Gale, as Mr. Satterthwaite could see, was not too pleased at this intrusion. She threw an angry look at Rowley Vavasor, who seemed quite unconscious of the offence he had caused. "Lunch is ready, I think," said Marjorie. "Good," said Mrs. Casson. "We will hold a séance immediately afterwards. Have you got some fruit for Mrs. Lloyd? She never eats a solid meal before a séance." They all went into the dining-room. The medium ate 2 bananas and an apple, and replied cautiously and briefly to the various polite remarks which Marjorie addressed to her from time to time. Just before they rose from the table, she flung back her head suddenly and sniffed the air. "There is something very wrong in this house. I feel it." "Isn't she wonderful?" said Mrs. Casson in a low, delighted voice. "Oh, undoubtedly," said Mr. Satterthwaite dryly. The séance was held in the library. The hostess was, as Mr. Satterthwaite could see, very unwilling. Only the obvious delight of her guests in the proceedings reconciled her to the ordeal. The arrangements were made with a good deal of care by Mrs. Casson, who was evidently well up in those matters. The chairs were set round in a circle, the curtains were drawn, and presently the medium announced herself ready to begin. "6 people," she said, looking round the room. "That is bad. We must have an uneven number. 7 is ideal. I get my best results out of a circle of 7. "One of the servants," suggested Rowley. He rose. "I will rout out the butler." "Let's have Clayton," said Marjorie. Mr. Satterthwaite saw a look of annoyance pass over Rowley Vavasor's good-looking face. "But why Clayton?" he demanded. "You don't like Clayton," said Marjorie slowly. Rowley shrugged his shoulders. "Clayton doesn't like me," he said whimsically. "In fact, she hates me like poison." He waited a minute or two, but Marjorie did not give way. "All right," he said. "Have her down." The circle was formed. There was a period of silence broken by the usual coughs and fidgetings. Presently a succession of raps were heard, and then the voice of the medium's control, a Red Indian called Cherokee. "Indian brave, says you, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Someone here very anxious speak. Someone here very anxious give message to young lady. I go now. The spirits say what she come to say." A pause, and then a new voice, that of a woman, said softly, "Is Marjorie here?" Rowley Vavasor took it upon himself to answer. "Yes," he said, "she is. Who's that speaking?" "I am Beatrice." "Beatrice? Who is Beatrice?" To everyone's annoyance, the voice of the Red Indian Cherokee was heard once more. "I have message for all of you people. Life here very bright and beautiful. We all work very hard. Help those who have not yet passed over." Again a silence, and then the woman's voice was heard once more. "This is Beatrice speaking." "Beatrice who?" "Beatrice Barron." Mr. Satterthwaite leant forward. He was very excited. "Beatrice Barton, who was drowned in the Euralia?" "Yes, that is right. I remember the Euralia. I have a message for this house. Give back what is not yours." "I don't understand," said Marjorie helplessly. "Oh, are you really Aunt Beatrice?" "Yes, I am your aunt." "Of course she is," said Mrs. Casson reproachfully. "How can you be so suspicious? The spirits don't like it." And suddenly Mr. Satterthwaite thought of a very simple test. His voice quivered as he spoke. "Do you remember Mr. Botticetti?" he asked. Immediately there came a ripple of laughter. "Poor old boat's upsetty, of course." Mr. Satterthwaite was dumbfounded. The test had succeeded. It was an incident of over 40 years ago which had happened when he and the Barron girls had found themselves at the same seaside resort. A young Italian acquaintance of theirs had gone out in a boat and capsized, and Beatrice Barron had jestingly named him Boat's Upsetty. It seemed impossible that anyone in the room could know of this incident except himself. The medium stirred and groaned. "She is coming out," said Mrs. Casson. "That is all we will get out of her today, I'm afraid." The daylight shone once more on the room full of people, 2 of whom at least were badly scared. Mr. Satterthwaite saw by Marjorie's white face that she was deeply perturbed. When they had got rid of Mrs. Casson and the medium, he sought a private interview with his hostess. "I want to ask you 1 or 2 questions, Miss Marjorie. If you and your mother were to die, who succeeds to the tide and estates?" "Rowley Vavasor, I suppose. His mother was mother's first cousin." Mr. Satterthwaite nodded. "He seems to have been here a lot this winter," he said gently. "You will forgive me asking, but is he fond of you?" "He asked me to marry him 3 weeks ago," said Marjorie quietly. "I said no." "Please forgive me, but are you engaged to anyone else?" He saw the colour sweep over her face. "I am," she said emphatically. "I am going to marry Noel Barton. Mother laughs and says it is absurd. She seems to think it is ridiculous to be engaged to a curate. Why, I should like to know. There are curates and curates. You should see Noel on a horse." "Oh, quite so," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "Oh, undoubtedly." A footman entered with a telegram on a salver. Marjorie tore it open. "Mother is arriving home tomorrow," she said. "Bother! I wish to goodness she would stay away." Mr. Satterthwaite made no comment on this filial sentiment. Perhaps he thought it justified. "In that case," he murmured, "I think I am returning so London." The voice in the dark. A fool. Mr. Satterthwaite was not quite pleased with himself. He felt that he had left this particular problem in an unfinished state. True that on Lady Stranley's return his responsibility was ended, yet he felt assured that he had not heard the last of the Abbott's Mead mystery. But the next development, when it came, was so serious in its character that it found him totally unprepared. He learnt of it in the pages of his morning paper. "Baroness dies in her bath," as the Daily Megaphone had it. The other papers were more restrained and delicate in their language, but the fact was the same. Lady Stranley had been found dead in her bath, and her death was due to drowning. She had, it was assumed, lost consciousness, and whilst in that state her head had slipped below the water. But Mr. Satterthwaite was not satisfied with that explanation. Calling for his valet, he made his toilet with less than his usual care, and 10 minutes later his big Rolls-Royce was carrying him out of London as fast as it could travel. But strangely enough, it was not for Abbots Mead he was bound, but for a small inn some 15 miles distant, which bore the rather unusual name of the Bells and Motley. It was with great relief that he heard that Mr. Harley Quinn was still staying there. In another minute he was face to face with his friend. Mr. Satterthwaite clasped him by the hand and began to speak at once in an agitated manner. "I am terribly upset. You must help me. Already I have a dreadful feeling that it may be too late, that that nice girl may be the next to go, for she is a nice girl, nice through and through. If you will tell me," said Mr. Quinn, smiling, "what it is all about." Mr. Satterthwaite looked at him reproachfully. "You know. I am perfectly certain that you know. But I will tell you." He poured out the story of his stay at Abbots Mead, and as always with Mr. Quinn, he found himself taking pleasure in his narrative. He was eloquent and subtle and meticulous as to detail. "So, you see," he ended, "there must be an explanation." He looked hopefully at Mr. Quinn, as a dog looks at his master. "But it is you who must solve the problem, not I," said Mr. Quinn. "I do not know these people. You do." "I knew the Baron girls 40 years ago," said Mr. Satterthwaite with pride. Mr. Quinn nodded, and looked sympathetic, so much so that the other went on dreamily. "That time at Brighton now, Botticetti boats upsetti, quite a silly joke, but how we laughed. Dear, dear, I was young then. Did a lot of foolish things. I remember the maid they had with them. Alice, her name was, a little bit of a thing, very ingenuous. I kissed her in the passage of the hotel, I remember, and one of the girls nearly caught me doing it. Dear, dear, how long ago that all was." He shook his head again and sighed. Then he looked at Mr. Quinn. "So you can't help me," he said wistfully. "On other occasions—" "On other occasions you have proved successful owing entirely to your own efforts," said Mr. Quinn gravely. "I think it will be the same this time. If I were you, I should go to Abbots Mead now." quite so," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "As a matter of fact, that is what I thought of doing. I can't persuade you to come with me?" Mr. Quinn shook his head. "No," he said, "my work here is done. I am leaving almost immediately." At Abbots Mead, Mr. Satterthwaite was taken at once to Marjorie Gale. She was sitting dry-eyed at a desk in the morning-room on which was strewn various papers. Something in her greeting touched him. She seemed so very pleased to see him. "Rowley and Marcia have just left. Mr. Satterthwaite, it is not as the doctors think. I am convinced, absolutely convinced, that Mother was pushed under the water and held there. She was murdered, and whoever murdered her wants to murder me too. I am sure of that. That is why—" She indicated the document in front of her. "I have been making my will," she explained. "A lot of the money and some of the property does not go with the title, and there is my father's money as well. I am leaving everything I can to Noel. I know he will make a good use of it, and I do not trust Rowley. He has always been out for what he can get. Will you sign it as a witness?" "My dear young lady," said Mr. Satterthwaite, "you should sign a will in the presence of 2 witnesses, and they should then sign themselves at the same time." Marjorie brushed aside this legal pronouncement. "I don't see that it matters in the least," she declared. "Clayton saw me sign, and then she signed her name. I was going to ring for the butler, but you will do instead." Mr. Satterthwaite uttered no fresh protest. He unscrewed his fountain pen, and then, as he was about to append his signature, he paused suddenly. The name, written just above his own, recalled a flow of memories. Alice Clayton. Something seemed to be struggling very hard to get through to him. Alice Clayton, there was some significance about that. Something to do with Mr. Quinn was mixed up with it. Something he had said to Mr. Quinn only a very short time ago. Ah, he had it now. Alice Clayton, that was her name. The little bit of a thing. People changed. Yes, but not like that. And the Alice Clayton he knew had had brown eyes. The room seemed whirling round him. He felt for a chair, and presently, as though from a great distance, he heard Marjorie's voice speaking to him anxiously. "Are you ill? Oh, what is it? I am sure you are ill." He was himself again. He took her hand. "My dear, I see it all now. You must prepare yourself for a great shock. The woman upstairs whom you call Clayton is not Clayton at all. The real Alice Clayton was drowned on the Euralia. Marjorie was staring at him. Who is she then?" "I am not mistaken. I cannot be mistaken. The woman you call Clayton is your mother's sister, Beatrice Barron. You remember telling me that she was struck on the head by a spar? I should imagine that that blow destroyed her memory, and that being the case, your mother saw the chance—" "Of pinching the title, you mean?" asked Marjorie bitterly. "Yes, she would do that. It seems dreadful to say that now she is dead, but she was like that." "Beatrice was the elder sister," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "By your uncle's death she would inherit everything, and your mother would get nothing. Your mother claimed the wounded girl as her maid, not as her sister. The girl recovered from the blow and believed, of course, what was told her, that she was Alice Clayton, your mother's maid. I should imagine that just lately her memory had begun to return, but that the blow on the head, given all these years ago, has at last caused mischief on the brain." Marjorie was looking at him with eyes of horror. "She killed Mother, and she wanted to kill me," she breathed. "It seems so," said Mr. Satterthwaite. "In her brain there was just one muddled idea, that her inheritance had been stolen and was being kept from her by you and your mother." But Clayton is so old." Mr. Satterthwaite was silent for a minute as a vision rose up before him, the faded old woman with grey hair and the radiant golden-haired creature sitting in the sunshine at Cannes. Sisters. Could it really be so? He remembered the Barron girls and their likeness to each other, just because two lives had developed on different tracks. He shook his head sharply, obsessed by the wonder and pity of life. He turned to Marjorie and said gently, "We had better go upstairs and see her." They found Clayton sitting in the little workroom where she sewed. She did not turn her head as they came in for a reason that Mr. Satterthwaite soon found out. "Heart failure," he murmured, as he touched the cold, rigid shoulder. "Perhaps it is best that way." Thank you very much for listening to this story, narrated by Jason Foser. Don't forget to subscribe to the Detective Tales channel and be sure to leave a comment.